welcome. We are back to do another Ask Me Anything, AMA, as they call it. So thank you to those of you who can attend live or who want to watch on replay later. This is the second time that we are doing this. We did the first one in mid-January, if I'm remembering correctly, and there were lots of good questions at that time. And I mentioned how I felt really humbled that any of you felt compelled to ask questions about my life and get to know me a little bit better. And here we are doing it again. So that way you can get to know me even more, ask some follow-up questions from the last time. So I've got a list of questions here, things that were emailed in, things that have come up during other events like our pods, and just some general questions that were sent in response to this event as well. So for any of you who are attending live, you are welcome to put into the chat any follow-up questions if you have them as I go. But as I said, I do have this list of questions compiled because I know a lot of you weren't able to attend this time specifically. So we'll have the recording up of this event. So I'll jump right into it. The first question that I wrote down says, I've mentioned embracing my gray hair as it comes and was asking how I shifted my mindset on that. It wasn't all at once, I would say. So I actually had premature gray in my hair. I was about 14 or 15 when I started having grays. And so as a high schooler, I wasn't into that. I had this nice like Cruella de Vil stripe down the front that was coming in, and I just started dyeing my hair. So the like pop punk situation was pretty popular at that time. So I had like a navy blue hair at one point, or like very red hair, purples and black, and I just killed my hair with your conventional boxed dye for a long time. Bleached it out totally blonde a few times, just any hair color that I felt like, then I would just cover it up. And it wasn't until I was 20, so around the time I was getting married, and I decided that I wanted to start dyeing my hair back to as close to my natural color as possible, so that way I could grow it out. And so the last time that I colored my hair was just before my wedding. And then after that point, I just let it grow out and become my natural hair. And it was really, really interesting because I actually didn't have any more grays. So in the couple of years leading up to my wedding is when I started getting into nutrition and getting into this industry, taking better care of my body, healing some of the issues that I had going on. And with that, I guess my premature grays also went away. So that was really neat and really exciting. So at that point, I thought I was ready for it. And then I didn't actually have those grays. And so then I would say towards my late 20s, like just before I was turning 30, was when gray started coming back. On my dad's side of the family, everyone goes gray very early, so not totally surprising. And I guess I was just taking it as it came. I had a year or so prior, I had what I will call a cancer scare, when I had some issues with my thyroid, which I did talk about in the last AMA. I ended up with a goiter, had some imaging on my thyroid, and was told that I likely had cancer in my thyroid. So I went several months waiting for testing and things, thinking that I might be living with cancer and what that might mean for my life expectancy and so on. So after that, when the grays came, I was actually kind of thankful for them, that like I didn't have cancer. I was able to regain my health, and seeing my gray hair is like this sign that I could be thankful that I was having the opportunity to age, because that was something that I had been questioning for a little while. So it was a bit of a journey for me to embrace my gray hair as it comes, and they're coming fast and furious these days. I will say the gray eyebrows are a little harder to love, but I don't have any desire to go back and put chemicals on my body or do any of those things that I used to do when I was younger before I knew better, before I knew what those things might do to my system. So it just is what it is. This is what I look like. And I'm okay with having a little bit of gray hair. The next question that I put here sort of ties in with that. And it was to describe a little bit more my journey with my thyroid, with Hashimoto's. I talked about the trigger for me, which was a CT scan that I had for a neck injury where they gave me an iodine dye, and that triggered a goiter. Before that, I had done really well, despite my extreme genetic predisposition towards thyroid issues on both sides of my family. Um, in keeping my thyroid in check, hadn't been a real issue for me. And then with this trigger, with the CT scan, it just threw my body out of alignment. That was like tipped me over the edge, I guess. And so symptoms that I had at that point were really, really severe. I was debilitated by the thyroid symptoms at that point. So things like my body had a really hard time regulating its temperature. So I would get random fevers that would last only, like 6 to 12 hours. I would also become hypothermic. So sometimes I would feel like I was getting a fever. I would take my temperature and it would be like 35 and a half. So regulating my body temperature was very, very difficult at that period of time. Just wasn't functioning well. I was fainting. I was having lots of issues with my skin, like very dry skin, peeling, cracking. Hair was falling out in clumps. My heart rate was quite variable. So sometimes it would be pounding super fast. Sometimes it would be really slow, having bad palpitations, joint pain, muscle pain, and aches, tons of headaches, and just the fatigue was crushing. There were days where just like getting up from my bed to go into the bathroom, I felt like I couldn't even do that. I would have to literally lay on the floor halfway, and it was like 20 steps, lay on the floor halfway to the bathroom to take a break, and then get up the rest of the way to make it into the bathroom. It was just fatigue that I had never experienced. And thankfully, relatively quickly figured out what was going on with my thyroid. So I could get on some treatment plans to put that into remission and get back on track. But I guess some of you were curious about what those symptoms were like during that period of time. So I guess my menstrual cycle also was really variable at that time. So lots of pain and like different length cycles depending on how my thyroid was doing. Just all the things that you think of with thyroid health were an issue for me. So I'm thankful that that's not the case anymore. All right, another question that I had here, again, that kind of ties in with my thyroid journey. I had shared about being on the autoimmune protocol for about the last 5 or 6 years in varying degrees. And so Connie, I think it was you, who was curious what led me to decide that that was going to be the best protocol for me. And how did I realize that? Or did I try lots of other things first? What was that journey like? So at the time that I had this CT scan, which triggered the thyroid issues, I was already still dealing with my brain injury. So I was only maybe a year to a year and a half into my recovery from my brain injury. And so that was still very forward in my life. A lot of things were revolving around my brain and my brain health at that time. And so I was already eating really well. I was already doing protocols with lots of nutrients, trying to do my best to heal from this brain injury. And so when I started having the thyroid issues, I was already eating paleo. I was already eating really high fat, like doing things that I think would have also potentially been healing for my thyroid. And so really the only other place to go was a little bit more restrictive. And so that for me was the reasoning behind doing the AIP. Was I was already kind of doing everything else that you would think of. Um, and that was the first time for me that I had shown this autoimmunity, at least in blood work. So I did have thyroid antibodies that came back high at that point. And so knowing that this was an autoimmune issue, it was just, I don't know, I guess I felt kind of called to it. It just felt like the right progression. And so I did try a lot of other things already. Like I said, I already had a really good diet and was already taking a lot of things. So AIP was sort of this next step. And I had used it with clients in the past. I had a fair amount of autoimmune clients in my private practice. And so recommending the autoimmune protocol as a strategy wasn't something that was new to me. I had seen it help clients, I had used it with them before. But I will say, even as a nutritionist and having had experience recommending this to other people and seeing the benefits, I was still floored by how quickly it helped me and how fast I felt better when I implemented the principles that are a part of the autoimmune protocol. So, like taking nuts and seeds out of my diet, um, there wasn't too many changes, as I said, because I was already on a paleo style diet, but nuts and seeds was a big one that came out. Eggs came out of my diet. Nightshades, so like tomatoes and peppers and things like that, came out of my diet. A lot of the seeds and things that I was doing were reduced. But AIP for me was also about the things to do. So a lot of times with the autoimmune protocol, I hear people talk about it as restrictive, which it is. But for me, it was also about the things that I needed to add in and that I needed to pay better attention to that I had been neglecting. So getting more sea vegetables in my diet, making sure that I was having organ meats regularly, looking at stress management and my sleep patterns and all sorts of other things that are part of the autoimmune protocol that actually made me feel this sense of adding in and not just the taking away of other foods. I think those things were just as valuable for me as the things that I did remove from my diet for a time. Was the stuff that I ended up adding in as a result of being on this protocol. So, how did I realize that it was for me? Honestly, 2 to 3 days after trying it, I was getting up. I wasn't having fainting spells. My heart palpitations felt better. My energy was increasing. I just had this sense that my body wasn't fighting itself so hard. And so that gave me the motivation to stick with it. And I did have times early on where I would try reintroductions and it wouldn't go well. So I stuck with it longer than I would probably recommend for other people. At this point, I am still in the process of reintroducing more things into my diet and being able to keep that autoimmunity in balance while I do that. But I'm in a much better place than I was back then when I was having these thyroid issues, which now was, 5 or 6 years ago. It's been quite a long time. And I just actually on Monday this week had some repeat blood work. I do my blood work now every 6 months or so. And it's the best that it has looked. It was really, really exciting to see um, how far I've come, really. And so for all of us who are on a healing journey, it can be quite validating to see some of those things that the effort is really worth it and it's paying off. And we see that with our clients, but it's really nice to see it for ourselves too. So all my antibodies are not at detectable levels, which is awesome. Like it's just not there. All of my thyroid hormones, the T4 and the T3 and the TSH, are all in the optimal ranges now, not even just in the normal ranges. So this stuff works, guys. I know we all know it, but I try to live those principles and definitely am reaping the positive results from following through on that. So AIP was a big part of that journey for me. And thank you, Jessica. I see your clapping hands telling me well done. I appreciate it. It does. It feels really good to have accomplished that. All right. Next question I see here. In the previous Ask Me Anything, I had mentioned that one of the boundaries I have around my eating is that I make all of my own treats. So if I'm gonna have a treat of some kind, I make it myself. Um, I'm a bit of an overindulger by nature, so that helps me keep myself in check and not overeat. If I was going to the store and picking out treats, I would be eating way too many of them. So that boundary helps keep me in balance. So the question around that was, what is my favorite go-to treat? And I was super like instant, fast answer for this because it has become like what I'm known for in our circle as well. Every time there's a dinner party or something, I'm asked to bring this recipe along because everyone loves it. Um, so it is coconut macaroons. And I have a few different variations of this recipe, but the base of it is coconut manna, or coconut butter, however you call it, and shredded coconut, and then some sort of a liquid. So sometimes I use maple syrup, sometimes I'll use lime juice or lemon juice for like coconut lime, coconut lemon flavor, and then just a little bit of other flavorings. So if I'm doing it with maple syrup, I usually add like vanilla powder, cinnamon. If I'm doing with lime, I might just add the vanilla and not include the cinnamon. But it's basically like a few ingredients, five or less, depending on how many spices I add to it. And they are so delicious. It is honestly like my favorite dessert. And it is coconut. So being on AIP, it's hard to get enough calories, I found, because I'm eating so many vegetables and you only want to eat so much animal protein in a day. So coconut was definitely a good source of calories for me being on that diet. So those coconut macaroons are for sure my go-to dessert. Lindsay, I see that you threw up in the chat here. Did I work with an AIP coach or did I just monitor myself and adjust the AIP program to me? Um, I did just do it myself for the most part. And I say for the most part because I'm in a family of nutritionists. So my mom is a nutritionist, my sister is a nutritionist, my sister-in-law is a nutritionist. My mother-in-law is a nurse who had a nutrition practice for about 25 or 30 years. So I have a lot of people close to me who do have skills in this domain. So for me, I had this idea on my own of what I wanted to do with my diet, and I am able to self-monitor pretty well. But I also had those folks close to me that I could go to if I had a really specific question. That said, I do typically work with a nutritionist who is like, an arm's length colleague or something like that, someone that I trust that I would check in with semi regularly, because we all have blind spots with ourselves and with our loved ones. So even though I was able to do most of that work myself, just with the experience I had already gained in clinical practice, I did still find it valuable to have someone else, not even just specific on the AIP piece, but just looking at my health as a whole, if there were gaps or things that I was missing and not seeing for myself, which there always is. So one example that I can give in working with a nutritionist around that period of time, they asked me, have you considered taking GABA? So I was having so many symptoms that were correlated with low GABA levels. And I was like, no, I didn't consider taking GABA, but you're right, I probably should have. And very short order was feeling a lot better with a little bit of GABA supplementation. So I do think it's valuable for us, even as clinicians, with all the experience that we have, to still have those folks on our team that we can go to for support. But I'm also pretty independent and felt pretty skilled. So a little bit of both, Lindsay, if that answers the question. All right, next one on my list here that I had. In the previous AMA, I mentioned sort of briefly, I think, if I'm remembering right, that I have a bit of a history with addiction in my teen years specifically. And so the question that was sent in was, given that What are my thoughts on alcohol? Uh, and this is a bit of a loaded question for me. I was kind of mulling this over this morning as I was getting ready and for my day. I do have complicated thoughts about alcohol. Personally, I will not consume it. It's just an absolute no, hard boundary for me. I know that I don't control myself well with alcohol. A little bit turns into a lot very, very quickly. Um, even, and this is a little bit of a tangent, I guess, but even thinking about most people who have struggled with addiction will talk about having this rock bottom moment where they realize that this was a problem for them. And I had so many moments that should have been my rock bottom. Think about the most dysfunctional, addicted teen behavior. I was probably engaging in it. Um, but my rock bottom was actually something um, pretty benign, I guess. So I had gone out to a bar with my best friend at the time for what was her 20th birthday. And I said to myself, I'm going to bring $20 to the bar. And that's how many drinks I can have, whatever I could buy with $20, which was probably going to be, maybe 3 drinks at the most. Um, After I ran out of that $20, I was asking everyone in the bar to buy me drinks, just behaving in ways that were not flattering. And that was my rock bottom moment, was just asking other people in the bar to buy me drinks. It was when I realized like this is not going to be cute for very much longer. I was a 19-year-old at the time, and so you could kind of get away with it. That's the legal drinking age where I live in Ontario. But that wasn't going to be the case for very long. And I just had this realization after that night of like, I really can't stop myself once I start. And so at that time, I was preparing to get married, and I said to myself that I wasn't going to drink until after the wedding. And then once I got to our wedding, which was like about 6 months later, I was like, I don't want to go back to doing that. Like my life has improved so much not having alcohol in it. And so I kind of had that positive snowball. So for me, for my life, my personal thoughts on alcohol, for me, it's just an absolute no, not going to happen. I don't even take like homeopathic tinctures or things like that are an alcohol base. I won't do it. It's just not good for me. For people in general, what do I think about alcohol? I think that we consume too much of it. I think it's a really big part of our culture, and I don't think that's beneficial for the health of our society, especially over the last few years. During the pandemic, during COVID, you can look at the statistics within Ontario, within Canada, within the US, within most places in the westernized world. And alcohol consumption was already high and has gone even higher during these last few years. And that it costs us so much societally, with health, with productivity, with mental health challenges that come along with it. It is a depressant. It just, I don't, there, the sleep issues that come along with alcohol use. There's just so many things that are less than ideal when we're consuming alcohol regularly. And so I don't love alcohol in general as like a thing that we do in our society. But I do think that some people can consume small amounts occasionally and really enjoy it, and that can be okay for them. But I think most of the evidence that I've looked at and read through data on says that occasionally is like a couple times a month, a couple drinks a month, not like 1 or 2 a day, which is sort of the recommendation to stay under where I live. So, if you're a person who wants to enjoy a glass of red wine when you get together with family for a holiday or something, I think for a lot of people that can be okay. But for me, it's not. Jessica, I see your note here that you agree we're over consuming it instead of enjoying it properly, like in other parts of the world. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I hear very often from my clients too that they need it. and people talk about coffee this way too, which is another thing that I don't partake in. That like they need it when they get home from work to be able to wind down. And I just, with my history, knowing my addictive tendencies, um, I kind of get like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when people talk about things in that way, even if it's something like chocolate, like, oh, I just have to have that at this moment in the afternoon. Anything that we feel like we absolutely require it for our life to be okay, um, it just, it makes me question. We ideally we can be a little bit more flexible than that, and you don't rely on alcohol to be able to wind you down at the end of the day, or you aren't reliant on caffeine as a stimulant to get you going. I see you mentioning sugar in the chat. Totally, I definitely have behaved like that with sugar in the past as well, and lots of people have that issue where sugar is very addictive for them. And you're using it for that like quick energy pick me up, that little dopamine hit that you get. So for me, I guess just my general thoughts on alcohol. For me personally, it's a hard pass. For people in general, I think we do need to be really mindful about it. And if you're going to consume alcohol, to do so in a mindful way and less frequently than like the mainstream would tell us is okay, probably once or twice a month at the most. Um, all right, next question here. I'm always wearing glasses. When did I start needing them? So this is a little bit of an easier question, I guess. Um, I first needed glasses when I was 14 in the ninth grade. My mom would always take my sister and I to get our eyes checked in like the couple weeks before school started to make sure we were good for the school year. So I went, I had my eyes checked, everything was fine. And then early October that year, I was noticing I couldn't really read things on the board at school. And so I went and had my eyes checked a second time in just a couple of months. And sure enough, I needed glasses. Um, so at that point, it was a really mild prescription. I really only needed it to see fine things far away. So if I needed to read the board at school or something like that. So I would wear them occasionally throughout high school. And then I've talked about kind of that 18 to 20 period in my life where I did a lot of healing my own health issues and got into this more holistic world. So during that period of time, my eyes improved as well. I didn't need glasses anymore. Once I got a bit healthier, replenished some of the essential fats in my body, got some DHA going and things like that, then I didn't need the glasses anymore. So I went many years not wearing glasses. And then after my brain injury was when I started wearing glasses full time, I'll say. And so the ones that I have now, I do have some distance prescription, and I'm getting into my mid 30s now. I'm starting to notice with the reading, things are, I got to find that happy place. But my glasses, the main reason for them, they have prisms in them, which help with kind of reorganizing the visual information that my brain is getting, because that visual area in the brain was really affected by my injury. So having the prisms, just it reorganizes that information, makes it a little bit easier for my brain to process. So it keeps me feeling more balanced on my feet and less strain to read things and go about activities of daily life. So I'm really thankful to have them, and I'm glad that I had someone on my team, the optometrist, who was able to look outside of the typical types of prescriptions and look at these prisms for me, because they were really life changing after my brain injury, got me back to feeling a lot more like myself. All right, next question here. Do you have a morning or an evening routine? Yes and no. Um, so I do have certain things that I do almost every day, maybe not every single day, but almost every day, either as a part of my morning or part of my evening, that like help me feel grounded and ready for the day or ready to get off to a restful sleep. But I don't necessarily do them in the same order or at the same time every day. um, that kind of shifts depending on what else I have going on. So some of the things that are part of my morning, I love having a big glass of water when I first wake up, which is It's super basic, right? But for a long time in my life, I was not well hydrated. So hydration is still something that's really important to me, and was like mind blowing when I figured out how much better I could feel by being hydrated. So a big glass of water in the morning. Often I'm doing lemon water. I do love lemon water. So a big glass of lemon water in the morning is a favorite. Um, what else do I do? Almost always, like, probably 99 out of 100 days, I'm meditating in the morning, doing some sort of a breathing exercise. Personally, I really love box breathing. So breathing in for a count, holding it for a count, breathing out for a count, and then holding the breath out for a count. That I really like doing. I do some sort of stretching, or it's called cueing. So again, this was part of my recovery after my brain injury, um, using just my brain to cue physical changes in my body with alignment and things like that. So working with my physiotherapist or craniosacral therapist will look at what are the most beneficial cues depending on how my brain and my body are feeling. And so I'll usually do some of that cueing. Um, which is basically like repatterning the nervous system to communicate better with the body again. So I usually do that in my mornings. In the evenings, I like to read something. So these days, oftentimes that's something for school, because I am in school full time. So doing some of my readings for school. Um, I do read for pleasure as well, though, like fiction books as well. So it could be that. In my evenings, I love just having some quiet time with my daughter, just talking about her day, hearing about things, doing some sort of a quiet activity with her. Sometimes we'll read together, do a little art project or something like that that just kind of winds us down for the day. And I really like having that quiet, just like calm time. Um, Before bed, I have a bit of a skincare routine now. Did not have one until like frighteningly recently. But as I said, I am getting into my mid 30s now. So um, it's just a little like facial cleanser, some toner, things like that, before bed helps me feel good. So really basic stuff. I'll often in the evening, if I have anything that's like floating around in my mind, I'll pop it down on my to-do list or write it down in a journal so that I can quiet my mind to go to sleep. And then usually as I'm getting into bed, I'm doing some sort of a visualization or a meditation again, or more breathing exercises, something that is calming me down, bringing me to sleep. Yoga Nidra, I really like doing. So sometimes I'll put an audio on that I can listen to before bed, and do that. So I would say those are like the main things, but I don't do them in the same way or in the same order every day. Um, by nature, I'm a little bit scatterbrained and kind of like to fly by the seat of my pants. So exactly what that looks like changes every day. Lindsay, you've said, what am I doing for school? So I am currently in university enrolled at Queen's, and I'm studying psychology with the ultimate hope to go on and do a master's in social work. I did talk about this a little bit in the last AMA, but in very short, my inspiration, the kick in the pants that I needed to go back to school was an experience that we had with adoption. So we had some siblings placed with us for adoption that didn't end up finalizing for bureaucratic reasons. And just having that experience with the child welfare system, seeing how much reform is required. I'm hoping that I can continue learning more and then be able to, either with volunteer time or part-time work with a nonprofit or something like that, be able to contribute contribute more to the child welfare system and the reforms that we need to see there to truly be advocating and serving at-risk youth as best we can. Thankfully, that has been happening, but there's a lot more work to do. So that was my inspiration to go back to school. And so I am doing that full time right now. And Jessica, I see your question. Do you also have time to cook from scratch every day? How do I have time for everything? Cooking from scratch. So I do like eat from scratch foods every day. I don't go out to restaurants. Um, so I am eating at home. My mom does cook for me occasionally. So that's a nice break when I get it. But I have a couple of different strategies. So I do meal prep. So I'll take like 3 hours on a Friday night or a Saturday morning or a Sunday or something, and just prep for the whole week. And then I've got, all the veggies chopped up, all my meats are pre-cooked, and I can just pull things out of the fridge or freezer. And like mealtime is then more assembly and less like cooking. So that really helps me with having meals available. And then something that our family did, which we started after my husband had his car accident, and so you don't have to go back and listen to past things I've said. The context there, he was hit by a drunk driver and had some spinal injuries. So rehabilitation after that was pretty significant. So something that our family was doing in that period of time was we actually hired another nutritionist who was someone that I'd gone to school with, and she was coming once a week and doing our meal prep for us. So, I would go out and get the groceries and plan what we wanted, and then she would come in, she would cook everything. And again, we would put things in the fridge or the freezer. So I would just have it to pull out for the rest of the week, because I was balancing, helping him with his rehabilitation. I had an almost 1-year-old at the time. We had our business that we had just expanded. So we had opened our multidisciplinary clinic and moved our health food store during that period of time. It was a lot of balls in the air. And so having someone else come in and do that meal prep was just like the best decision that I ever made, honestly. And so she would usually come like around 4 hours to prep everything. And for the $100 or, $120, whatever it was that I was paying, super worth it. And, most people are spending that in a restaurant once a week. So instead of our family, we don't go out to restaurants. So we will splurge and spend the money on meal prep. So we still have that. It's not the same person. But I do have someone who comes occasionally now. It's usually like once or twice a month. She'll come and do some meal prep for us and just like get the meats pre-cooked, put things into the freezer, blend up like pesto sauces or things like that that I would want to have to use to assemble for other meals. And so that really helps keep it a lot more manageable. So how do I have time to do everything? I guess sort of I don't. I've hired a little bit of it out when I've needed to. I really don't believe we can all be perfect at all the things all at the same time. So I do have help. I have strategies that work, like I said, doing the meal prep myself, but we still do splurge and we have someone come in and help us with that every so often. All right. Next question that I had here. I've mentioned recently having a family member going through a cancer journey. And so this person was curious about the journey and having that passenger seat view, knowing what I know, if there's been any obstacles or conflicts as I've supported this person going through their cancer journey, or if it's changed my perspective on anything. And since I was asked this earlier this week, I have put a lot of thought into this. I've kind of been rolling this over in the back of my mind for many days this week, how to best answer this. And so the thing that kept coming to the top of my mind that really is my biggest takeaway so far is that sometimes we just know the right thing to do, even if it like on paper doesn't sound like the right thing to do, that we just have that feeling in our gut or in our spirit or whatever that tells us that this is the path that we need to take. So this family member was very suddenly diagnosed with cancer, very young, healthy person, generally quite holistic minded. And so the thought of going through a cancer journey was not on anybody's radar. And certainly conventional treatments were not like top of mind for any of us in our family. And so surprising to me that this person was like, no, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do the conventional thing that's being recommended. I'm going to do the chemo. I'm going to do the immunotherapy. I was surprised how quickly they came to that decision. Um, and also like how much confidence, and not that they're not conflicted, not that it's not frustrating and a bummer and all of that, but they still had or seemed to have this like confidence and peace that like this was what they needed to do. And that really, really surprised me. But it was also very affirming that for all of us, we have that voice in the back of our head or in our gut, or your higher calling, however you conceptualize that, that gives us that direction at really critical times of life. And so for me, that's been the biggest eye opener and takeaway, is just seeing that in action for someone else. I've certainly had moments like that in my life where I've made decisions that I thought I would never make. Um, and it was the right thing to do in that time. And it felt like the right thing to do, even though it seemed to be in conflict with so many other things that I believe. And so that for me, was has been a really important part of being able to support my family through this journey. And then the other part of it, it's been an opportunity for me to practice boundaries, um, and what support looks like, because I, I joke a lot, but I'm also very serious. I'm quite neurotic by nature. I like to control things. I want everything to be the way that I want it to be. Um, and I'm not in control of this. And, giving my advice on what they should do in terms of supplements to take, or exercise programs, or sleep, or stress management, or whatever, is actually not the best way that I can be supportive in this instance. So, they have their doctors and they have their nurses, and we've built an integrative team around them as well, with naturopaths and nutritionists and other people who are able to give advice. And I've been able to step back and really just support. And that is something that I have really struggled with, in other times in my life when things have been kind of chaotic, that I try to hold on even tighter, right? And so for me, this has been a bit of personal growth in that I can just be present, and I don't have to control the situation. I can just accept it for what it is. I can listen to the intuition. Of course, I'm giving like little pushes, let's do this or let's not do that. Here, let me help you in this way. Um, but just having that ability to step back and just be there is very different than how I might have behaved in the past. So for me, that's like the biggest personal growth for me. And then in this question here, are there any obstacles or conflicts? Yeah, there are. Our medical system sucks. If I'm super, super frank, there have been issues with like wrong medications being administered, appointments being changed at the very last second, terrible communication. It's very frustrating, and I'm capable of supporting and like going above and beyond to do the extras, to find the information that we need to make sure that things are correct. But not everybody is, and not everybody would even have the information to see, well, actually, this doesn't make sense based on what we've been told before. Like, let's triple check that. And so that does worry me. Just like generally speaking, how many people are getting care that's lesser than, or receiving incorrect treatments or medications or bad advice, or not getting referrals that they need because it wasn't communicated from the doctor to the support staff, and then the person forgets about it. So that has been the biggest obstacle and conflict for me, is just coming up against that like medical establishment and seeing how taxed it is, the level of disorganization and the poor communication. That Not that I'm entirely surprised, but it is disappointing to see that there's so much room for improvement within that system. All right. What is next here? Okay, so I had another question here. Um, the person said they feel like I have a pretty full plate, I guess, talking about going to school full time, having lots of different jobs, being a parent, all of these things. So the question was, how do my husband and I manage each other's careers and time management? And how do we support each other when it comes to that? And I think this is another really, really great question. Um, and because I value honesty, I will say at times we have not done this well. So we've been married over 13 years now, together for more than 18, and it hasn't always been pretty. I kind of joke that, we've been together for 18 and like 10 of them have been good. But that's marriage, and life is hard, and we've certainly had our fair share of obstacles to overcome together. But to more seriously answer the question, how do we support each other when it comes to each other's careers? Um, I would say we both just generally believe in each other's abilities. Um, my husband is so creative. He is a creator by like his trade. He has a YouTube channel and does lots of online marketing and things like that. But he's also like super huge tech nerd and does all sorts of things that I don't understand at all. So he works in engineering at a software company as well, full time. So he's got lots of stuff on his plate too. But I just really believe in him. And so that makes it really easy for me to support when he has like this crazy idea that I'm like, yeah, you should do that. When we were closing our business and he said, I think I'm gonna just focus on YouTube. Most people were like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't just be a YouTuber. And I was like, no, if that's what you want to do, like, let's do it. And there's been lots of other examples of that in the past where he supported me with things and I've supported him with other things that seemed really crazy at the time. Um, but I will say that is sometimes, although it's our biggest strength, that like we believe in each other so much that we just like want to see the other succeed. It is sometimes a weakness as well. As much as it's a strength, it is a weakness, and that is the way with all things that are strengths. They can also be weaknesses, I think, because sometimes that leads us to not having very good balance in our lives, because we both just like want to do all the things, and we have so many ideas and so many things that we think we could be good at doing, or ways that we want to contribute to the world. And sometimes it might have been better if I had heard, I don't know if you can take that on right now. Let's think about this before we jump head on into it. Yeah, I feel you're both dreamers and it's beautiful. Yeah, we are both dreamers. It's true. I am definitely the more logical. So he will sometimes accuse me of being a dream crusher, because I'm coming in with like the numbers and the facts and the logic. But I still very much am a dreamer. I have big ideas and big things that I want to do. Um, so for us, sometimes that is a weakness. And I think that we're getting better at that as we get older. I don't know if that's just like an age and maturity thing, or if it's a way that we've grown in our relationship. But we are getting better at like, okay, let's take a step back and think about what some of the consequences of pursuing whatever this is might be. So that way we can protect other things that we value in our lives, like having time with family or having leisure time, being able to pursue hobbies or learn new things, being able to have time to do all those things that we want to do and not just only be focusing on career. So I think we are doing better at that now. But it is still something that we have to be really, really mindful of, because both of us, our nature is to just like jump in head first. We're cannonballing into the deep end. We're not the people who like dip their toes in and see how it feels. So we do have to be somewhat mindful of that. And then there was a sort of, this is the last question that I have here. So those of you who are here live, if you have any other questions that you want to ask, pop them in to the chat now, because this is the last one that I have sort of preloaded, which is a bit of a follow-up. And it says, how do we stay inspired in our professional careers when we have so many other responsibilities? And especially lately, I've been doing a lot of caregiving. I've mentioned that to some of you in our group here in Networking Nutritionists. And so balancing that type of responsibility, it's sort of new to me. I have young parents, and like up until last year, my great grandma passed away last year, just about a year ago. So the idea of like having aging family is very new to me. Those type of caregiving responsibilities, walking with someone through this cancer journey. My mother-in-law has a back injury. She's having surgery tomorrow, actually. So it's been a few month process of helping her. I just all at once, most of the people in our family had some sort of crisis at the same time. So I was doing a lot of caregiving. And so balancing that professional career with those other responsibilities, how do I do that? How do I stay inspired? I don't know. I think it is a little bit just like innate in our nature. But I also think it has to do with being very in touch with what I want to do, how I want to contribute, and being able to see the value in it. And so that's a lot of why this group exists in the way that it does today in Networking Nutritionists. There's just such value in that connection, and it's something that I've always benefited so much from throughout my career as a nutritionist, as I've moved through different stages. And so I just feel that like deep in my being, like right in my gut, that this is something that I want to do and be able to connect people and bring them together. And so it just feels very natural to act on that. Yes, there are times where I feel demotivated. Yes, there are times when I feel overwhelmed, but just being very in touch with what my values are and what I want to contribute, it helps me to make those decisions and stay inspired about the things that are really important to me. I see your question here. For my family member's cancer, were they offered a non-conventional treatment that they decided against in favor of chemo, etc.? What would have been the non-conventional path? So there are non-conventional paths. It likely would have involved relocating. There's some treatment centers in Mexico, and a couple in Europe as well, that we briefly looked at. Also, just watching and waiting is an option. So they were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 4. So just watching and waiting to see what happened would be an option. Not very recommended, either in conventional or the alternative pathways, but was offered. And so they are doing the alternative and integrative treatments alongside the conventional. So chemo and immunotherapy is the typical conventional treatment. They are doing that. So it's a once a month, basically, cycle for 6 months. But they are also receiving, they have a supplement protocol from a naturopathic oncologist. There's a fasting protocol that they're doing around the time of chemo and immunotherapy infusions that is supposed to help reduce the impact of the chemotherapy on the healthy cells and target more towards just the unhealthy cancer cells. So it's a 5-day fast around the time of the infusions. So that's part of it. And then there's also like weekly vitamin C IV therapy, which is a treatment in and of itself for that specific type of cancer, because the vitamin C actually acts as a pro-oxidant, not an antioxidant, when it's taken intravenously. And when the cancer cells take up the vitamin C, which they do preferentially because vitamin C and glucose have similar molecular structures, once the vitamin C is taken up by the cancer cells, it creates hydrogen peroxide inside of the cell, and that can lead to cell death in those cancer cells. So they are doing those treatments as well. Other things were offered, like hyperbaric treatments or hyperthermia, like localized hyperthermia treatments to increase the body temperature in specific areas. But decided not to do those until we saw how the conventional and alternative together was going for the first little bit. So they've just passed the halfway point. So I mentioned it's a 6-month treatment. They've just passed the halfway point, and it's going very, very well. Just about as well as I think you could hope has been the outcome so far. And very minimal side effects at this point, which is awesome. So I've been able to continue working and like living life, which is great. So yeah, there were other options that would have been more intense on the non-conventional side. But they decided to do this conventional treatment, the chemo, the immunotherapy, and then I've sort of married that with having support with the more integrative therapies, which I think is helping with tolerating the conventional treatment a lot better and having less of those negative side effects as well, and potentially working as a treatment as well. So I see here as well, what initially inspired me to start the Networking Nutritionist Facebook group back then? I don't know if you spoke on this before. So I actually didn't start it. So if you go back, the very, very first video we ever posted in Networking Nutritionist was an interview with myself, Julia Rickert, and Joy McCarthy. If you want to search that up. And so it was actually Joy McCarthy who started the Facebook group. And originally she talks about when she started it, it was just a way for her to stay in touch with her classmates after they were graduating from IHN. And it started to grow and grow and grow. And at some point she needed help with adminning the group. So Julia Rickert, who was working at IHN, came on, was helping her to admin the group. Julia did that for about 5 years. And then again, the group was getting so big. So Julia wanted some help, and then at some point needed to take a step back. I was adminning the group at that point, and basically it's just kind of changed hands. So Joy started it, Julia took it on, and then at some point I was adminning, and both Joy and Julia had decided to step away. So I have adminned that group since oh gosh, I want to say 2016, maybe 2015. I can't remember exactly. But what initially inspired me is I had so much experience up to that point. The first 5 or 6 years of my career, I was doing a lot of work in person, in physical spaces with other nutritionists and practitioners. Having our clinic, working in the health food store setting, going out, doing workplace wellness, all these sorts of things that were in person, physical connection. But I can only talk to so many people in a day. I can only be in a place with so many people. And I am a very introverted person. So the online community that the Facebook group was offering seemed like a really nice compliment for me. I do still think in-person connections are extremely valuable, and we should all be fostering those. But I've been able to connect with people who I never would have been able to connect to if not for a more online platform. And then in terms of transitioning Networking Nutritionists onto Mighty Networks, I'll say just very briefly, had to do with Facebook and censorship rules, and we were at risk of losing that group altogether. So moving it onto Mighty Networks, where we had more control over what we could say, we could have more free speech, and just that ability to continue connecting with one another was why I had to make that decision to move it. We were really we were really at risk of that entire group being deleted. So didn't want to lose it all. And at least at this point, Networking Nutritionists as the Facebook group, it's still archived. And so you can still search like all the past posts that happen in there, and different conversations on different topics. So at least we kind of saved it in that way, that it's in that little bubble, and hopefully it can continue to live there. Yeah, this community, I see your comment there that you love this community and this platform. Me too. I think as nutritionists, we have so much to offer the world. We have a really unique set of skills, and each of us individually is bringing so much interesting experience to the table, personally and professionally. And I think just having this connection with one another, motivating each other, inspiring each other to continue growing in our personal lives and also in our professional lives is helping the whole world. We all need these principles so much to just be living in a more holistic way, especially after the last couple of years that we've had. So this group is really important to me too, and I'm so happy and thankful and grateful to be able to connect with all of you in this way. So it looks like that is the last of the questions for today. We went a little bit longer this time than we did the last time. So I appreciate those of you who attended live, and for everyone watching on the replay, thank you so much for that as well. Again, it's very humbling that anyone wants to hear me talk about my life in this way. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the questions and the thoughtfulness. And maybe we'll do this again. We'll have to see if this becomes a regular thing. So thank you again for watching, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.